Hey guys, in this video I'll be focusing on PvE builds for the Crusader. I want to start off with the highest solo DPS build first, and then I'm going to transition to show all of the builds that I'm using for every single PvE mode in the game. But let's start off with a 1 minute damage test for the highest solo DPS, so here we go. And some of you will already notice that this build comes directly from Oroth. And if you somehow haven't heard of him, in my opinion he's one of the best content creators for Diablo Immortal. And if you want to check out his channel, I'll be leaving a link to it in the description. I've already shouted him out many times on my channel before, and we also did a collaboration a few months ago, and we're hoping to do another one soon, so I'd really urge you guys to check him out. And I'll also be leaving a link to all of the relevant videos from his channel as well, where he did a deep dive in a lot of the builds that I reference here. But my aim with this video is not to reinvent the wheel. What I'm actually going to be doing is comparing every single relevant meta build in one video and give you guys a more informed decision on which variation to choose for your setup and for the kind of content that you're playing. And the good thing about Crusader builds is that because they're using similar mechanics in that they're all using dots and or resolving dots with condemn, the optimization part is actually very similar. So here we go, 1 minute damage test, and I've reached almost 1 billion, just shy of 1 billion damage there. But yeah, we did about 16.6 million damage per second. You'll notice the breakdown here. So I've got a decent amount of damage from my primary attack, Sacred Fire, and then I've got a really nice damage from the Shield Glare, and then finally the bulk of the damage is coming from the Judgment here, which is being resolved by the Condemn. I think that in Oroth's video he took this to over 2 billion total damage, which is more than double my damage, which is crazy, but he's using a bit more optimized gems with a higher rank, and also he has Chip of the Stoneflesh, which is surprisingly really good with Crusader with any of the blind essence, because it provides you with the loss of control and the armor break effect, which is really good. But I don't want to go too deep right now. I'm going to start off with talking about the essence and also the set bonuses, etc., and then we'll take it from there, because I want to quickly go over through a lot of different builds in this video. So here we go. As far as the essence go, what I'm using here is the Gaze of Wrath helmet, which gives you a burn effect for your Shield Glare, paired with the Lofty Light, which gives you the blinding aura effect, which is going to last pretty much forever and have 100% uptime. So this combo is incredibly powerful. I've already covered it in my previous video where I shared the meta PvP builds. If you haven't seen that one, also check it out. And then for the Pants Essence, we're using the Sightless Chaucers, which is the new Pants Essence that we got, and it says that Shield Glare deals increased damage to enemies the closer that they are, up to a maximum of 38%. And then as far as the other essence goes, we're using the usual Heart of Grandeur for Condemn, which gives you the aura around you in a circle, and the Torrential Refrain, the offhand. This is just incredibly good. If you guys know about Crusader, this essence is key, and it basically allows you to resolve dots. So it says that Condemn immediately triggers all continual damage effects on the targets it hits, causing them to take the remaining damage instantly. So if you apply like a burn effect or a bleed effect or poison effect, it's gonna basically resolve that immediately, and rather than taking the damage over a few seconds, it's gonna basically tick all the damage all at once, which is really nice. And then aside from that, we're using the Yawning Rose, which is the shoulder essence for Judgment. This is going to also apply the burning effect, and like you guys saw, this just deals a huge amount of damage. I think that this essence is likely to get nerfed in the next patch, but we'll see. I think it will still be strong either way, but let's just touch wood. Hopefully it doesn't get nerfed too hard. And then for the main hand essence, they're not really that important in this specific build. Actually, I would say that they're okay, especially this one, Horn Splitter. So what this says is that Sacred Fire gives you another burn dot effect, which is really good. And then the second main hand essence is the Bristle, which just gives you a little bit more damage and gives you some kind of range on your Sacred Fire, so that's really good. So talking about the skills that I'm using now, in case it wasn't obvious, I'm using Shield Glare for the blind, which is going to proc the loss of control effect, which gives me increased damage multiplier because of my magical attributes, and it also gives me the extra dot burn from the helmet, like I mentioned. And then I'm using Judgment, which is really good with the shoulders essence that I'm using and provides a huge amount of damage. And then I'm using Condemn here. And then for the last skill slot, I'm using the Holy Banner. This is just a base vanilla banner without any essence here, so it's just giving me 100% crit. And then what you'll notice I did on the dummy, which is what Oroth recommended, is that I press these 3 skills here, and then once my rolling consequence crit chance downtime happens, I can basically press the Holy Banner to kind of cover the critical hit chance that I get, which gives me an increased damage, which is really good. So the downside to this is that with this vanilla banner, the banner obviously has some health here, and it also has the duration. And the more pressing thing is the health here, because the mobs can easily damage this banner. And this is kind of the downside of using the vanilla banner, is that you can kind of lose this banner effect really quickly, and it also doesn't follow you. It's stationary to where you're standing. So this build, honestly, even though it's really impressive, the numbers it does, unfortunately, it's a bit impractical in real use. And I will be talking about some variations which Oroth has actually mentioned himself. I'm not kind of dissing his build. This build is really insane, but yeah, definitely do want to try out the other variations in real play. One quick thing I do want to mention is that previous to this build, Oroth had another iteration before this Pants Essence was released, where he was actually using a Sacred Chain Pants Essence, this one here, called Equal Portions, and this is the skill that he was using instead of the Holy Banner. So he had a setup that looked something like this here. So this variation does do decent damage. I think I had about 14 million damage per second over a minute, compared to 16.6 that I showed for Holy Banner. So it does do a little bit less damage, and I can kind of understand why he switched to the Holy Banner setup. But we actually do have some other really good options with the Fire Banner setup, which I'll be talking about, which I think is even better than this and a bit more practical than using the vanilla banner. So let's actually quickly show that build now, but before we do that, I quickly want to show my gem setup, because I'm not going to be changing this. So this is what it looked like, and also my set setup, I'm not going to be changing any of this. It's going to be identical for the Fire Banner build, just so we can do a fair comparison. So this build did about 16.6 million, and let's quickly change to the highest DPS for the Fire Banner build. This is what it looks like here. So I'll quickly activate this. And the difference here is you can see with the essence, what I've changed is the Iron Ignition, and I've also changed the Pants Essence. Now we're using the Light Striders, which is the Horse Summon, which is really good. And the last essence I've changed is the Blinding Wall here. I'm using this to actually apply the blind effect with Condemn rather than the Shield Glare, because we're no longer using Shield Glare, and instead we're using the Horse Summon paired with the Iron Ignition, which is really good with the Fire Banner here. So let's quickly see how this build does, but as you can see here, my gem setup is identical. I haven't changed anything here, and also the sets are exactly the same. One thing which is really good with this build is that you actually do want to use the Echoing Shade gem if you have it, but I'm not going to be using it here, just so we can have a fair comparison and see how this build does over 1 minute compared to the Vanilla Banner build with the Shield Glare. So here we go. Let's just see how it does here. So I'm just going to quickly go for a minute here, and hopefully my horses actually hit the target, because sometimes they like to do their own thing. But let's see how this does here. So far it's a pretty impressive start, I have to say. So we did about 20 million there per second over 10 seconds, but it should be dropping off. And I did test this before, and it did a bit less than the actual vanilla banner build with the Shield Glare, which Oroth showed. But like I said, this does have its advantage in that the banner cannot die off, and also you will be able to give your teammates a buff with the Fire Banner, which is incredibly useful. So here we go, we're about 40 seconds in now, and we've done 14.5, I want to say. And let's just quickly go for a minute, just so we have a fair comparison here. Come on, let's go. So there we go, last 5 seconds here. Let's just see how it does. And there we go. So we did about 14.6, I want to say, which is about 100 million damage less over a minute, but it's still incredibly good damage, and in my opinion, it's worth using a build like this, to be honest, over using the vanilla banner. In case you guys are wondering, I did also test this build out with Echoing Shade, so I replaced my Mornskull here with a rank 7 Echoing Shade, which gave me 3 clones, and this, as expected, works really well with the Fire Banner, because the clones actually do primary attacks, which get buffed by the Fire Dot from the Fire Banner here. And this gave me 15.1 million damage per second, which is only about 10% less than the original first build that I showed. And I believe that, to be honest, the DPS, just because you're doing 10% less, I still think that the utility that this build provides is still better, in my opinion. So this is the build that I wanted to showcase for the highest DPS. And what I'll be doing now is actually going over the sets and also the Paragon that I'm using, which is going to be very similar for all the builds that I showed today. So for the set pieces, I'm using 4 pieces of Angment's Conflagration, and this gives me a 30% additional Ignite status, which is going to extend the burn effect. And then for the 4-piece bonus, gives me another burn dot effect, which is really nice. And then I'm using 2 pieces of Feasting Baron. This is really, really good because it gives me 30% extension on top of this, which is going to pair really well with the high potency in in this build. And then for the last two piece, I'm using Vithu's Urge, which is a must-have if you want to have a higher uptime for all of your skills. So this, I believe, is going to be the sets which work the best for Crusader, and this is pretty much the meta for both PvP and PvE. It's just really crazy how good this set combination is. And then for the Paragon Tree, what I decided to use is the Slinger Tree here. So I'm using these three nodes: Uncanny, Unseen Dynamism, and Gift. And then I'm using these two nodes here, Bloodthirst and Superiority, but you could switch these out for something else. Because on the dummy you're not taking any damage, you'll be able to stack this really high, so that's really good and it works really well. And then for the legendary skill, I'm using Death's Release, but you could honestly also switch this out. And then let's move on now and talk about the legendary gems really quickly as well. So for the legendary gems, these are pretty much the same as what Orth is using, almost the same, I want to say. The unfortunate thing is I don't have Chip of the Stone Flesh, which works really well. So the reason why it works really well is because of the blinding effect. So the blinding is either coming from Blinding Wall here with Condemn, like I said, or with the Lofty Light with the Shield Glare. So both effects provide a blind, which is going to give you 100% uptime of the armor break with Chip of Stone. So if you have it, use it because it's really good. Unfortunately, because it's out of the gem pool, I don't have it, so I've replaced it with Morn Skull. But aside from this, from my testing, Orth did a really good job, and these are the most optimal gems. So I've got Bloodsoaked Jade, Bottled Hope, I've got Roiling Consequence for the crit chance, I've got Misery Elixir. This works really well, pretty much very similar to the two-piece Feasting Barons. And then I'm using Colossus Engine, which is the new gem. I've got it to rank 8 somehow. I got really lucky finding a bit more duplicates, so that's really good. And then, like I said, I've put in Morn Skull instead of the Chip of the Stone, and Spectre Glass here. And then finally, I'm using the Pain Clasp, which is a really good 2-star gem. I think that Orth was also using Fervent Fang, and that could also be used in place of this. So other than that, basically you want to be using dot gems or damage gems. So things like Viper's Bite, 2-star gem, or Everlasting Torment, 1-star, or even Berserker's Eye, 1-star, could work really well here. Another good 2-star gem to use here, which would boost your critical hit chance, would be Mother's Lament. So if you don't have a very high rank Roiling Consequence, or if you don't have extremely high critical hit chance from your magical attributes, then that would definitely be an excellent gem to use. Maybe as well as having a Roiling Consequence in your setup, I think you could have excellent results with it. But the important thing, like I said here, which I will be changing, is that I will be putting in the Echoing Shade over the Morn Skull here, and this actually gives me more damage. I just didn't do it now because I wanted to have a fair comparison. So if you have Echoing Shade, especially at rank 3, it will have 2 clones, and at rank 7 it will have 3 clones. So that's really good, and it works really well for any Fire Banner build variation. If you're using the Shield Glare variation, you don't need the Echoing Shade because it isn't going to be buffed by the Shield Glare. So just to reiterate one more time, Chip of the Stoneflesh should work really well with the Blind Essence, either from Blinding Wall or from Lofty Light. So use it for both builds. And then for the Fire Banner build exclusively, you want to be using the Echoing Shade. Even if you're not using Chip of the Stone, it's still worth using Blinding Wall. This is because of the magic attributes or the Reforges. So you can see here I've got damage to enemies suffering loss of control, and also having the magic attributes on the items which give you damage to enemies suffering loss of control. Unfortunately, I don't have it on here, but I should have it on this piece here. Yeah, damage to enemies suffering loss of control increased by 10%. So this also benefits from having the blind effect here. So now that we've covered the highest DPS that we can achieve currently for the Fire Banner, I quickly want to talk about the small changes that I make to this build when I play different content. So if I'm playing Oblivion Pillars or Hellslayer Bounties, I actually do use this exact build. The only thing that I do change is my familiar, and instead of a Lingering Wound, so you can see I have a Brute Talon here, and it has a Lingering Wound skill, and this works really well for an armor break effect with either Brute Talon or Skitterwhite. But instead of this, I go for the Savior Pet because I just like to have a bit of extra safety in case I get a really challenging boss and I don't really want to waste my Terra Essence. So this is the only thing that I do change. So let's move on now to show the Vanguard variation. So for Vanguard, I use this exact same build with this exact same setup. The only thing that I do change is I change the sets here. So rather than using the 4-piece Angments, I replace 4-piece Angments with another 4-piece of Vithus. So in total, I have 6 pieces of Vithus, and this is just because of the heal. The heal effect is incredibly good in Vanguard, and it's better than the healing charms in my opinion, especially in this Vanguard where you aren't moving around so much, and having this stationary heal is just going to save your party and have them basically return to full health completely. And if you stagger this effect, if a lot of players have it in the party, it's just incredibly good. And this is what a lot of people that are running and pushing the Elite 10 in Vanguard are doing. So the other thing I do change is the Paragon Tree. So if you're late in the Vanguard season and you already have a rank 20 Vanguard charm, you can actually keep this Paragon Tree as it is. But if you're struggling a bit with survivability, you can actually switch out these nodes here. And this is what the Vanguard variation looks like. So basically, you want to take the Indestructible, you want to take Unyielding, Stalwart, and Precognition, and then you also want to take the Regeneration here. You could also switch out Precognition here and go for Resilient here, which is going to give you a bit more healing. Both of these variations are really good. And then for the legendary skill, I also changed this up and went for the Benefactor here instead of the Death's Release, and this was just going to give you an extra shield, and it also buffs your party so that they have a bit more survivability. So that's about it for all of the changes that I do for Vanguard. So we've covered Oblivion Pillars, Hellslayer bounties, and also Vanguard, and now I want to move on to show the raid setup or the Gauntlet setup. So it's exactly the same. I'm not changing anything. Obviously, I am going back to the Slinger Paragon Tree, so let's quickly do that. So I'll just activate this, and I'll also go back to the Death's Release here for the legendary skill. I think that this is a little bit better. And then for the raid setup, one square like this, obviously I'm not using 6-piece Vithus there, although you can use it if you really do need the healing in the raids or the Gauntlet. But basically I keep this exact same setup as it is. The only thing that I do change is because this blind effect doesn't work on bosses. I'll quickly show that here. So if I just press my condemn here and move to the normal dummy, you'll be able to see that while I have my mouse over the dummy, it has like a blue eye icon there, and that's basically the blind effect, and that blind effect basically lasts forever. As you can see, it has 100% uptime as long as I have 100% uptime of condemn, and this is what works really good with the chip of stone flesh like I mentioned. But unfortunately, if I move to the boss dummy here, as you can see, I'm mousing over the boss and that blind icon is nowhere to be seen. So obviously the blinds don't work on bosses, and so does the loss of control, the damage to increase done to increase the loss of control enemies. Unfortunately, doesn't work here. So what I do like to do for the raids and the gauntlets is actually switch out this essence here, the blinding wall, and instead go for the sacred fire essence, which gives me increased primary attack speed. This is just going to deal really nice damage, and in fact this build actually does pretty much almost identical damage to the blinding wall. It just depends what you need and what utility you need, because the blinding wall works really well on like normal blue elites and also the normal mobs, whereas this is going to work better on the single target bosses that don't benefit from the loss of control. So I want to move on now to talk about my dungeon setup, which is actually really similar to this. This build is just so versatile in my opinion, and I still really like this fire banner just because it gives you excellent damage and is able to buff your group. I'll say that many times, and in my opinion it's a bit more versatile than the shield glare. Even though the shield glare is really good and it does have its use cases, which I'll be talking about, I still do really like this fire banner. So for my dungeon setup, all that I've changed compared to the raid setup is that instead of this light striders here, which is not going to give us any mobility, I've actually switched this out to the galloping brilliance, which gives you a really nice horse, and it's actually lasting for a really long time, and you'll have almost 100% uptime. Unfortunately, we have to keep this slot for judgment, which is going to give us excellent damage, and we won't be able to use the Sifket's advantage. But yeah, basically you'll have pretty much maybe 1 or 2 seconds downtime if you don't have good beneficial effect duration rolls or cooldown rolls. And then for this offhand here, I'm also changing this back to the blinding wall offhand, because like I said, most of the time we are going to be mounted. We won't be able to get the full effect of the sacred fire with these two main hands and also the sacred fire offhand. So I've switched this back to the blinding wall, and this is basically the build that I'm using for dungeons. So we've got the galloping brilliance, and then it's pretty much the same with the judgment, condemn, and also the fire banner here. So even though this is my favorite dungeon build in the current meta, I'll quickly talk about the other variation that people use, which is with shield glare, and it looks something like this. It's kind of similar to what I showed at the start of the video. So we've got the Gaze of Wrath here, and then we've got the Lofty Light here instead of the Blinding Wall as well. And this is what the build looks like. And then we just replace the skills here. So obviously you'd go for Shield Glare instead of the Holy Banner. And this is a really excellent dungeon build. So the same, you can just ride around with your horse. Just rather than the banner, the fire banner, you've got an extra aura, which is the shield glare aura. And I actually tested this on the dummy for a 1-minute rotation, and this gave me 13.2 million damage per second. So obviously we are losing a bit of damage to get the extra mobility from the horse mount. But comparing this to my fire banner build did 12.9 million damage per second, so it was only about 3% damage comparatively, and like I said, the shield glare isn't really providing any group buff, whereas the fire banner really does have good utility. So it all depends on what you want to play. If you want to be the main damage dealer and your group isn't that strong, then you should really go for shield glare here with this setup that I've mentioned. If you want to have a bit more utility and actually buff your group, and you know that your group is doing good damage, then you should stick with fire banner, especially if you have an echoing shade gem ranked up, like I said. In my opinion, one place where shield glare actually trumps the fire banner is going to be in the challenge rifts, and this is because of Lofty Light's blind. So Lofty Light's blind, in my opinion, is a bit more potent than the blinding wall blind. So this lasts for 3 seconds every 5 seconds, whereas blinding wall is something like 1.5 seconds every 3 seconds, and I just think that this works a bit better with the aura. And I actually want to show you guys really quickly how good this works in challenge rifts. This is actually going to be my challenge rift setup, so I know that a lot of people use this in dungeons, but I actually really like to use this in challenge rifts. So let's actually give this a quick try here. I'll quickly be trying challenge rift 439 here, which is going to be really challenging because I'm about 1k combat rating under. This isn't my highest combat rating setup, so let's just see how this goes. And just so you guys can see, this is what my secondary stats look like currently, and they're all lower than the recommended. I guess the potency is a little bit higher than the recommended potency for this particular rift, but other than that, they're all pretty much lower than the mob secondary stats. So let's just quickly see how this goes. I think that this is the worst mob type, honestly, but let's just see how this goes. So we have a blue mob here. Normally I try to skip ahead and kill multiple blue mobs, but I just want you guys to see how good this works. So I wouldn't recommend to actually go in the middle too much and try to use too much primary attack. I'm just using it sparingly because I want to just focus on surviving, and this is going to be a bit challenging because basically I'm doing the voiceover while playing live, which isn't really what you want to do. But you can see that it's doing excellent damage. Most of the damage is coming from Judgment anyway, so primary attack isn't really doing that much. The horse is just there to give you the extra damage aura, and also to give you mobility in case the mobs actually give you a waller or something like that, some nasty affix. But as you can see, I should be able to clear this rift as long as we get some blues here. I won't actually be clearing this rift because I have a really good time on my Blood Knight and I don't want to overwrite it. But yeah, I will be pushing for Paragon 800, and we'll be pushing challenge rifts then, so I will definitely be clearing this at a later date, probably on Monday. We'll see how it goes. As you can see, we have a blue here. I'll try to pull this other blue down here, and then we have a third blue even, and that's nice. So wow, 4 blues. Okay, this is I mean, not the best mob type, but we got 4 blues here. Okay, I'll try to make a big pull. This might be cool to show on the video if I can survive here. I'm not sure if I can, but let's just see. I'll try to pull some of these mobs here, and let's just see how it goes. So those 2 mobs at the back are being a bit annoying, but as you can see, my Judgment is ticking like crazy, and the shield glare is doing a really good job. It's kind of confusing the mobs, and they don't really know where to hit. Let's actually see. Maybe I can move these mobs up here, maybe. Let's just try that. Okay, yeah, they're following, and I'll bring these ones here as well. So this is a nice spot here to fight them all. So let's quickly just show this. I don't want this video to drag on for too long. So there we go. I've killed off all of the blues, and as you can see from the progress, I should be able to clear this. And this is with 93%, like I said, less damage, and 1.5% more damage taken. So now that I've gone through a lot of different builds for all different kinds of content, I'm going to end the video with the farm build, or the Terror Rift build, if you will. And for the farm build, I actually do use a really similar setup to this. So I'm also using Shield Glare. So basically, Shield Glare, in my opinion, is really good for challenge rifts and also for farm build, because challenge rifts, you're going to be playing solo, unless you're doing group challenge rifts, I guess. And also Terror Rifts and farming, you're normally not going to have the full effect of the banner, because most stuff is going to be dying really fast. So you're basically going to be using this build. The only difference that you're going to have is that you want to have maximize the 100% uptime of your horse. So you actually do want to take out the Judgment here. I mean, you could potentially use this build if you're really struggling and you're a free-to-play player which doesn't have much damage. You could actually use this exact same build for both Terror Rifts and farming. But for my case, I do like to switch this out to the Drawn Quarter, the Sifket's Advantage, which gives you extra horse duration here. And then in that case, since we have an extra skill slot because we're no longer using Judgment, you could switch out the main hand essence here for the Falling Sword essence here, which is the Luminous Rain. This one is still really good. It doesn't give you that good damage, but because it has 100% uptime and gives you a little boost, it's actually really nice. And then as far as the skills go, I usually like to have the horse on this skill slot here, and then for the Falling Sword, I usually put this instead of the Judgment, like I said. So there we go, that's my open world variation. The only other change I make is with the Paragon Tree. So I usually like to go for the Brawler here for the increased size, so something like this, but you could also play with the Vanquisher Tree, something with Treasure Hunter, something like this. I think that that's all the builds that I wanted to show, guys. Hopefully that's covered pretty much everything in one video. In the final part of this video, I want to talk about how you can optimize these builds to get the most amount of damage out of them. So these optimizations are going to work for every single one of these variations that I've mentioned. So I'm going to go through it here as fast as I can. So for the Reforge bonuses, as you can see, this is what I'm using. So I've got critical hit damage, duration of beneficial effects, and then I've got 3 pieces of Vengeance bonus. Even though this isn't a primary attack based build, we're still getting a decent amount of primary attacks done. So you're going to have a nice boost to your damage, and more importantly, this damage to loss of control is really good. And then I've got damage to demons, it's really good in PvE, and then attack speed is also decent just to get that vengeance set prop. So this is what you want your PvE setup to look like. You could also switch out critical hit damage for something like skill damage. That would also work really well, or maybe even something like elite damage would also be decent from the, I believe it's the Ravager set here, also has up to 6% elite damage. This is actually really strong as well. So that's it as far as the Reforges. Let's move on now to talk about the magic attributes and enchanting. So I'll quickly go over the greens first. So for the greens, you really want to maximize your cooldown, and you can get cooldown on your amulet, your gloves, and both your rings, and you can get up to 4% for a double stat exceptional and 5% cooldown for a single stat. So that's what you want to go for. And from my cooldown stat, I have let me see, I have 17% here, and this is going to be incredibly useful because a lot of your skills basically have pretty long cooldown, and you just want to have 100% uptime, especially for things like the horse, and also for your shield glare, condemn, etc. For all of these skills, pretty much cooldown and beneficial effect duration are incredibly important. So back to enchanting here. Like I mentioned, cooldown every one of these pieces, and then beneficial effect duration you can get on your belt and also on your boots. As far as the bracelets go, there's not really that many useful stats you can get on it for PvE, so you can kind of skip on these. So aside from cooldown and beneficial effect duration, you could roll some more offensive stats. So on the rings, you have potential, if you have 2 stats, you can go for cooldown, and then the other stat can be something like damage increased by 4 to 8% to enemies below 30% life. This is a decent one to have here. And then on the gloves here, this is kind of a perfect example. So I have skill cooldown and damage done to enemies suffering loss of control. This works really well with the blinding effects, like I said, from Lofty Light and Blinding Wall. And you could also go for damage done increased by 1 to 2% per nearby party member, or damage done to demons, or even damage done to elites. Any of these stats would be good to pair along with your cooldown. So that's it for the green sets. So now that we've gone over the optimal magic attributes for the set pieces, let's go over the ones for the legendary. So I'm going to start off with the chest and the pants. So for the chest and the pants, there's not really that many good magic attributes you can get. The best one is beneficial effect duration. If you can get that up to 6%, then that's really good. Other than that, maybe if you get like some eternal properties, then they could be okay. Something like for condemn, judgment, I'm not sure, but they're not really that good in my opinion. Just go for beneficial effect duration here. But the really important stat that you do want to go for is critical hit chance, and you can get this on your helmet, you can get this on your shoulders, and pretty much every other piece aside from the chest and the pants. So that's kind of the priority. Once you have like your 4% crit on all of these rolls, you want to go for offensive stats like skill damage or critical hit damage. They're both really good. And then damage to enemies suffering loss of control. But like I said, the main priority should be to get the 4% crit, which unfortunately I haven't been able to get everywhere here, and I don't really want to re-roll my pieces just before we reach the new difficulty level, but it is what it is. So that's pretty much it for the magical attributes. For the curse gear, it's also not really that important in my opinion. I have pretty much all kinds of stuff here. So I have 4 pieces of detested and 3 pieces of atrophied, which isn't ideal, but basically you can go for like either lashed, atrophied, or detested. Those would kind of be the best just to get a little bit more damage, but it isn't going to make that much difference. You can just experiment with this or keep it as it is for your PvP setup. It doesn't really matter that much. So finally, the last thing that you can optimize is your warband room. And for the warband room, you want to be either using the attacker warband room if you need a little bit more damage in the content that you're doing. I have all 3 rare of the remnants here, which are really good. Other than that, you could also go for the increased size. This is probably my favorite one to use in PvP, but also for farming, because it gives you the increased size here. So you can see from the protector here, the shepherd's burden, this one gives you 15% increased size, which is really good, and it will make a difference to your movement speed while farming. So I think that that's about everything that I wanted to cover here, guys. I did have a lot of people requesting that I make this video because they saw me streaming and they weren't sure which PvE builds I was using for Crusader. So here it is. I hope I've been thorough enough with my explanations, and I hope that you guys have liked this video. So I will be having another video up before the end of this week, and in case you're pushing for Paragon 800 next week, that's going to be one to watch because I will be having some new strategies there, but keep your eyes peeled for that one. And in case you're wondering about Crusader PvP builds, I did cover that in my previous video, and I'll be having a link to that on the screen now if you want to check that one out. But for now, I'm going to be signing off, guys, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace.